What we'll do from now doesn't seem all that uncertain. We all have our own ambitions now, just as Lilly said. But even so, it feels like there's a certain missing part in both of our lives now, something that can never be replaced. The snap of my mobile phone's closing contrasts with the ambient chatter and noise audible even in the hallway outside the library. It's the first day of the summer holidays, a time that had perpetually seemed so far away, and yet it's now not only here but also made painfully obvious by the students, or lack thereof, left in the school. Most students have returned home to spend the holidays with relatives by now. The few that are left are mostly chatting between themselves, usually about what they intend to do in the coming weeks. It makes me feel like the odd one out for taking advantage of the school library being open for the first several days of the holidays. Ostensibly, it's for the students to drop off any books they borrowed and have yet to return, and for those who will have their parents pick them up to help pass the time until they get whisked away. Thanks to the recent lengthy phone call from my parents, which had so rudely woken me from my sleeping on a beanbag at the back of the library, I'm now in the latter category. Sliding my phone back into my pocket, this time remembering to set it to silent, I go back to the quiet and wholly placid room. It's a nostalgic sight. Just as when Lilly first led me to the library, the orange tint of sunset bathes the room in its light, while Hanako sits on a beanbag silently reading and Yuko fusses, just barely visible behind the counter. Hanako especially has been noticeably more quiet than usual since yesterday's happenings, but I can't really blame her. It wasn't just me that depended on that person, after all. I quietly walk back to the beanbag near where I've sat before, being doubly careful not to make any unnecessary noise. The soft puff it gives as the bag takes my weight makes Hanako's eyes flick toward me, but only for a second. I get the feeling that Hanako's been quiet only partly out of sadness following Lily's departure. Rather, she seems more thoughtful and measured than I expected, perhaps due to her desire of working out how to deal with Lily's leaving, rather than just being depressed over it. It makes me a little proud of her. Hey, Hanako. Yeah? Still going ahead with your idea of traveling? She gives a determined nod. I'll be starting in a day or two. Naomi's decided to come with me, too. Wow, I say, quick start. Where are you two headed to first? I think that we'll start by going north, then loop down and go southward. So, Hokkaido's going to be first? She gives another nod, more tentative than the last. The significance of that place is not lost on either of us. Do you know how you're going to handle the traveling expenses and accommodations? I ask her. Yeah, I've worked everything out. I think it should be okay. Naomi says she has her side worked out, too. You know that if you need anything, you can just call, right? I tell her. I gave you my number before. Any time of the day is fine. She gives a smile, which in itself feels like a small personal victory. I know. Thanks, Hisao. Maybe Lily was right. Although I may offer Hanako any help I possibly give, I feel as if I know she doesn't need it. She really has grown. Hanako's plans for her holidays are in sharp contrast to my simple following of my parents' suggestion to stay with them. Holidays have always made me feel less excited than most, though, so maybe this is just a return to the status quo. Before my heart attack, I'd always lived so aimlessly that holidays weren't all that much different from my everyday life anyway. After school, I'd wander around a bit in the city, often hanging out with some friends, before making my way home to eat dinner with usually one of my parents, but rarely both. Their work schedules didn't leave much time for them to be home, and going there straight from school would have just meant I'd end up feeling bored. I was an urbanite through and through. Since coming to Yamaku, though, it feels like I've fundamentally changed as a person. The phone call with my parents erased any trace of doubt I might have held on to that, in any case. While before I'd exercised a fairly normal level of independence for a teenager, that being not a whole lot, my parents were more than pleased to hear of my newfound ability to taking care of myself. Laundry, cooking for myself, cleaning, all in addition to other general chores that come from living without parents around. Just little menial things I've had to pick up, but with relative ease. When I think about it, I'd always depended on them, even if they hadn't been at home all the time. To say I'd never depended on anyone after moving to Yamaku dormitories would be far from the truth, though. Excuse me? The two of us look up at the awkwardly fidgeting figure in front of us. Some things never change. It's getting close to closing time, Yuko says. So, Oh, right. I'd forgotten that the library closes earlier during the holidays. Hanako and I both get up and dust ourselves off, placing our books back on the shelf behind us. The fact that our taste in reading material have a fair amount of overlap is useful at times. With a bow to Yuko to apologize for taking so much time, Hanako takes her leave of us. See you tomorrow, Hisao. Bye, I tell her. And with that, she walks out of the large wooden, aging doors that herald the entrance to the library. She's a quiet person, isn't she? I suppose I should be surprised at a staff member sharing personal opinions like this, but after knowing Yuko for a while, it's largely expected. Our relationship is more personal rather than one with her acting as an authority figure. Yeah, I think that's just how she is, I say. She's got a lot more confidence in herself these days, though. I don't know her as well as you do, but I think I agree. It's nice to see her talking to people here. She never used to do that before. Hey, Yuko, I say. You know about Lilly's leaving, right? She told me herself a few days ago. It must be hard leaving everyone behind like she is. She quickly looks back to me after she says this, probably remembering that I went to her for advice on the relationship between Lilly and me before. Are you going to be okay? That's a difficult question. It's something I'd rather not think about for now, though, given more pressing issues. Something seems kind of off about this whole deal, don't you think? I ask Yuko. She appears to think for a while, absent-mindedly scrunching her face up in a variety of creative ways as she does so. I don't think I really know her well enough to make that kind of judgment, she says. I'm sorry I can't be more help. Nah, that's fine, I tell her. I'm just sort of thinking aloud. I give a deep sigh and scratch my head in frustration. There's just so much stuff happening at once that I have no control over. It feels like I'm being swamped. I think everyone goes through times like that, Yuko answers. What's important is to concentrate on what you can do rather than what you can't do. At least that's how I see it. If I didn't think like that, I don't think I'd be able to manage my life as it is. She says it with a smile and a light tone, but her words are far from any kind of joke. Being pulled between two jobs as she is, just to hopefully make enough money not only to live, but also for university, must be exhausting. Perhaps that's why, coming from her, this feels like it has more meaning than if it had come from most others. I tell her, I guess you've got a point there. Thank you for your advice once again, Yuko. She bows deeply and smiles again before making her way back to the counter where she spends so much of her time. The tiny wings of the cardboard crane in my fingers are only just visible in the dim light of my room, just a little of the moonlight being able to peek through the curtains and around their edges. I lie still in my dark bed for a long time, idly looking up at the little origami bird. It feels like a lot's happened since Lilly folded this, but at the same time, it feels like very little has changed. Compared to everyone else, I'm back to square one. I might have a newfound idea of where I want to go in life, but that's hardly something that affects me now. Hanako changed, I know that much. If anything, she just makes me feel like I've got no excuse to be like this, considering her previous situation. Lilly, though... I turned the bird in my fingers another way, looking at it from yet another angle. When I first met her, she seemed aloof and perhaps somewhat distant. Her actions were always careful, measured, and precise, and her carefully maintained composure always gave the appearance of unerring confidence and serenity. In time, she became less formal. Just a bit, but enough. It felt good to see her lowering her inhibitions around me and opening up even just a little of her own accord. It felt as if I was seeing her real self slowly become more vibrant and visible. Now, though, I'm beginning to have doubts. Perhaps they're to be expected after what is effectively the two of us breaking up. They don't feel new or strange, though, but rather like an old book being found and dusted off. I soon realized after meeting Lilly that she saw me as she did Hanako, as someone who needed help and care. At first, I simply thought that we'd be fine as friends, helping each other through our limited time together in school. But then I began to treasure our moments together more and more, from our quiet walks to our talking over lunch. The good sides of her personality became ever more obvious and ever more likable. The absence caused by Lily's trip to Scotland to visit her long-distance family and sick aunt only made me realize how much I liked just being around her, and I had thought that she felt a similar way. For her, though, maybe that wasn't everything to our relationship. Even after she returned to Japan, that just meant she lost her family once again after meeting them for such a brief time. She lived so much of her life without her family around, not to mention with Akira working long hours, that she had little choice but to be like that. I had thought her sense of independence to be a good and admirable trait. It was in stark difference to my reliance on my parents before my heart attack, as reluctant as I may have been to admit it. However, it also meant that she never let people get too close to her. She lost her family, likely due to her blindness, went to a different school from anybody she knew because of it, and worked all the harder to make sure she didn't end up a burden on her sister and those around her. And now, Akira's going to Inverness, just like the family she thought she'd lost. She never told me of her plans, as conflicted as she was about them. Lilly didn't want to be a burden on anyone, including me. I'm an idiot. I never questioned it. I never tried to be there or asked when she needed me to. I just set my life up and expected it to stay that way forever, with the two of us having a nice long relationship where we pushed forward toward our future together. A small pit of frustration and anger at myself wells up in my chest. I just let everything happen, never even trying to help Lilly. Just her being there was enough. I thought I could keep going on if that were true. But that could never have been enough. It was a childlike dependence on somebody without any attempt to understand or help their situation. Thanks to that, I lost Lilly. I lost the one person I loved most because I wasn't there for her when she needed me. With an increasingly angry feeling washing over me, I turn over and set the crane back on the desk next to my clock, the place where it has lived since that day when she folded it for me. Since that day when she herself said that my burdens needn't be my own. The obnoxious bright red numerals on my alarm clock shine through the darkness of the room into my tired eyes. 10 o'clock. Evening. Curfew will be soon. I wonder, I say aloud. Akira mentioned they'd be leaving this evening. I've no idea exactly when their flight is, but that means there's a chance, however small, that they might not have already left. Adrenaline starts to move through my body as I sit up on my bed, my eyes suddenly wide with possibility. There's no guarantee they haven't left. Indeed, it's likely that they already have. But there's also a chance that they haven't, however small it may be. Just this once, just as I should have before. I stand up and rush over to my cabinet, throwing out some clothes as fast as I can and sliding them on in quick succession. Each second that goes by is a second that I can't regain, a second that may mean the difference between catching them and losing them forever. Even if I fail, I have to try. I can't let her leave everything behind without even trying to stop her, without just this once being there for her. With the last of my clothes slipped on, I hastily grabbed the phone off the desk. Luckily, the number for a local taxi company is still in my call history. A gruff, unenthusiastic voice announces the name of the company while I pace around the room. It takes some effort to slow down my voice and keep it clear over the phone. The chilly night air sweeps against me as I open the dormitory door, but nevertheless I keep up my brisk speed as I half jog, half run out to the school gates. It may not be curfew just left, but it's precariously close. If there were a guard around, they'd no doubt have some questions for me, but it looks like I've managed to come out just before they arrive, or they're round a corner. My pace picks up as I make my way through the school gardens. their nighttime allure all but lost when I begin to run to the school gate. The lamps of the courtyard, dim as they are, provide just enough illumination to light the way and prevent me from tripping over. The buildings themselves take on a rustic, almost antique-looking edge when I glance at them. Looking back, it seems so strange that they once appeared so dark and looming to me. Now they just look to be somewhat anachronistic school buildings, the same as any others bar their age. Leaving the gates behind me, I pull up to a stop just before the taxi. Parked just as Akira's car had been, its gaudy and brightly lit sign looks out of place in the quiet country backdrop. I impatiently squeeze myself through the door, giving the driver the address for where the two should hopefully be staying. By the time the taxi pulls up after its trip at maddeningly casual speed, it's well and truly deep into the night. The house is truly enormous, its sheer size much larger than I expected and ominously still. Fearing the worst, I ask the driver to stay just in case my efforts are for naught. A single press on the fancy intercom system outside the gate produces a short electronic melody in the otherwise silent road. It's not long before a somewhat deep, gruff voice can be heard from it. "This is the Hakamichi residence. Please state your name and why you're bothering us this late." I press on despite inwardly wincing at the reasonable annoyance audible in his voice. "It's Hisao Nakai. I was hoping to meet Lilly or Akira if they're still here." Surprisingly, I managed to summon quite some energy to my voice, enough to make the other side of the intercom silent. A few seconds pass, but just before I press the button again and ask what's going on, a light turns on outside the front door. I strain my eyes to try and make out who is coming through, but as he comes past a large parked car with fishing rods sticking out the back, his identity becomes clear. His face is typically plaid and emotionless as he saunters up to the gate. He's still childlike in his mannerisms, despite his demeanor. With the press of a few buttons from behind the fence, the gate slowly opens. "Hisao, what are you doing here?" I think this is the most emotion I've ever heard from his voice, not that it would be hard to reach that mark. "Akira told me that she and Lilly would be staying here before they left for their flight. I need to talk to Lilly just one last time. Are they still here?" The look on his face says everything. I failed. I was too late. The one time when I actually needed to act quickly and... "Actually," Hideaki says, "it's possible." "What? What is it?" He's a bit taken aback by my fervor, but I can't help it at this point. "They left not long ago," he says. "Only a few minutes before you arrived, in fact. If you go straight to the airport, you might be able to..." "Hisao?" I dart back to the waiting taxi, grabbing what little money is left in my pocket as I go. "Thanks, Hideaki." With that, I take a seat and in short order bark out my destination. It's the day after Akira and Lilly have left, and Hisao finds himself, as he does so often in the Lilly and Hanako path, sitting in the library reading and thinking about the space left in his life right now. After talking for a bit with Hanako and hearing her plans and how her life is going on, he begins to feel kind of like he's in kind of a holding pattern. And then talking to Yuko, she once again proves her wisdom by telling him, she gets through life by contemplating and thinking about the things that she can do and concentrating on that rather than concentrating on the things that she can't do. So he goes back to his dorm room, picks up the origami crane that Lilly had given him in the past, and realizes, that it was a emblem to her that he didn't have to bear all his burdens and everything on his own, and realizes that he never ever did that for her, never offered it to her. That basically he just continued to rely on her and lean on her for everything and never really offered anything back in return. And that right there may be part of the reason why she felt that she was ready to return to Inverness, is because she didn't really have a support system here and that he was an idiot. Of course, I think that part of it as well as you have to remember it's high school drama going on here. She is at least partly to fault in that she never, opened up to him and let him know that she needed support or that she expected him to be around or anything. And I think definitely the misplaced emotion on her part that she wasn't going to tell him about leaving because she didn't want it to be a burden upon him was about misplaced and not his fault. But regardless, that is the conclusion he comes to, and he realizes that he needs to at least make an attempt, that maybe he's got one more chance if he can just catch them. So he gets a taxi, tears off across to the town where, Shizune's parents, the Hakamichis, tears off to their house, where Akira and Lilly were going to be staying for the day before they left. Finds out they've already gone, but Hideaki says you might still be able to catch them. They only left a short while before you came. So he thinks he's got one more chance. Flies, gets in the taxi cab, and heads off to the airport. So will he catch him? We'll have to see tomorrow, won't we? And we will see then.